Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's story begins in the quiet town of Kingsmere, where a wedding was meant to bring joy, but instead it brought death. As the church bells rang to celebrate the vows, a man collapsed at the altar, poisoned, before the ceremony had even begun. And when the bells tolled again the next morning, another life was taken by the very same hand. When Hercule Poirot arrives, he realizes the killer has turned ritual into revenge, each toll marking a secret long hidden beneath love's facade. 2 rings for 2 lives, and a third yet to come. Stay with us till the end. And if you love mysteries where every sound carries a warning, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Bell That Would Not Stop Ringing. It began on a fog-choked morning in late October. The kind of morning where London felt like a city holding its breath. The lamps along Baker Street glowed like pale ghosts, and from every doorway came the echo of a world still half asleep. Hercule Poirot sat in his armchair by the window, his posture perfectly upright, his eyes half closed. Not in rest, but in thought. His little gray cells, as he often said, were at work. Across from him sat Captain Arthur Hastings, reading the newspaper aloud, as was their custom when the world offered no case to chase. 2 identical murders in 2 cities, Hastings read. Both victims found with the same calling card, a silver bell in their right hand. Scotland Yard has no explanation. Poirot's eyes opened. He did not move for several seconds. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the newspaper from Hastings' hand. "The same silver bell," he murmured. "Yes," said Hastings. "One in Birmingham, one here in London. Both men found in locked rooms. No signs of forced entry. The police say it's impossible." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Impossible, mon." He caught himself. Impossible, Hastings, is merely the word men use when they are too weary to think. He read the details in silence. Both murders had occurred within the same hour. Both victims, respectable businessmen, had been found dead from a single stab wound to the heart. The bell in each case had been placed deliberately in the victim's hand. Poirot folded the newspaper neatly. "Fetch your coat, Hastings. We shall visit the scene of the London murder. I believe the police inspector will welcome a fresh pair of eyes." Hastings sighed, though his excitement betrayed him. "Another locked room case? It's been a while." The crime scene lay in a quiet district near Hyde Park, a house of wealth and order, owned by a man named Mr. Leonard Whiting, who was now, as Inspector Jameson grimly put it, as quiet as the grave. The inspector led them through the hallway to the study. "We found him just there, in that armchair," he said. "Door locked from the inside, window sealed. No footprints, no signs of a struggle." Poirot paused on the threshold, taking in every inch of the room. The details were small but loud to his trained eye. The clock on the mantelpiece had stopped at 10:14. The fire in the grate had burned down to ash. On the floor, near the victim's shoe, lay a single sheet of paper torn from a notebook. Blank. But it was the silver bell that drew Poirot's attention. A small handbell, beautifully crafted, polished to perfection, its clapper crusted with a faint trace of dried blood. He bent to examine it, gloved fingers hovering over the handle. "This bell," he said softly, "was placed with great care, not as a message, but as a mark." Jameson frowned. "A mark?" "Yes," said Poirot. "A sign left for someone, but not for the police." Hastings, glancing uneasily at the corpse, asked, "What could it mean? A bell? Perhaps it symbolizes alarm or warning." Poirot smiled faintly. "Or perhaps remembrance." He moved closer to the fireplace. A faint line of soot ran down the inner bricks, as if something small had been burned recently. He took the poker and stirred the ashes. Out fluttered a scrap of charred paper, the edge of a printed letterhead still visible. the Bell Society. He handed it to Jameson. Does this name mean anything to you? The inspector shook his head. Never heard of it. Then, Hastings, we have our direction. Poirot stood, brushing dust from his sleeve. We must learn who or what the Bell Society is, and why its members are dying. That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings found themselves in a narrow street off the Strand, outside an unmarked door with a tarnished brass handle. A discreet plaque read, "The Bell Society, established 1901. Hastings glanced around. Looks like a gentleman's club, doesn't it? Poirot nodded. A club, yes, but not for gentlemen, perhaps for those bound by something older. Tradition, guilt, or secrecy. Let us see. Inside, the air smelled of cigars and old wood. A tall man behind a mahogany desk greeted them with a stiff bow. Good afternoon. Are you members? Poirot smiled politely. No, sir. We are making inquiries regarding Mr. Leonard Whiting. At the name, the man's hand trembled slightly. Ah, Mr. Whiting. Terrible business. He was one of our oldest members. Poirot noted the man's unease. And this society, monsieur, he caught himself again. Sir, what purpose does it serve? It began as a collector's group, the man explained. Antique bells, you see. Some from churches, some from ships. But over the years, it became more private. Only 12 members remain. 12, repeated Poirot softly. And now 11. The secretary's gaze darted away. Indeed, Poirot leaned forward. Tell me, sir, do your members each possess a particular bell? A symbol, perhaps? The man hesitated. Yes, each member owns a silver bell. They were made as tokens of unity when the club was founded. Identical in shape, but engraved with initials. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And who crafted them? A jeweler named Henry Colley. He died years ago. Ah, said Poirot. Then perhaps the bells themselves have outlived their maker, and now toll for others. Hastings looked puzzled. But why would anyone kill over something so trivial? Poirot's voice grew soft. Because, my dear Hastings, what men hold sacred, they also fear. When a symbol binds them together, it also binds their guilt. The next morning brought grim news. Another member of the Bell Society, Mr. Adrian Brooke of Birmingham, had been found dead in his study. Door locked, no struggle, silver bell in hand. The press called it the twin murders. Poirot sat in silence as he read the report. Then he looked up sharply. 2 deaths, identical in manner, identical in hour. The killer is conducting a ritual, a pattern, and there will be a third. Hastings stared. A third? Yes, said Poirot quietly. Murderers who think in patterns seldom stop before 3. The number completes their design. He rose abruptly. Hastings, we go to Birmingham at once. The journey was heavy with silence. The countryside sped past, gray and damp, the rhythm of the train echoing the thought in Poirot's mind. Death rings twice, and perhaps thrice. Inspector Jameson met them at the Birmingham house. Same story, he said grimly. Locked room, no signs of entry. The bell placed in the hand. But this time we found something odd. He led them to the study, identical in layout to the first. On the table lay a small glass vial, empty except for a residue of dark powder. Poirot examined it closely. Gunpowder, he murmured, or something like it. But why here? Then he saw the photograph on the desk, a picture of 4 men standing before a great bronze church bell. The inscription beneath read, St. Mark's Orphanage, 1901. Poirot's expression hardened. Hastings, do you see? These men knew each other long before this society was formed. This is not about bells at all. It is about something they did together, something that has come back to toll. They returned to London that night, and Poirot withdrew into a silence that even Hastings dared not interrupt. He sat before the fire, eyes fixed on the dancing flames, murmuring now and then under his breath. At last, near midnight, he spoke. 3 men in a photograph. Two now dead. The third will soon hear his bell. Hastings leaned forward. Do you know who the third is? Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, Mr. Edmund Vale, the current chairman of the Bell Society. And I believe he knows why the others were killed. Then we must warn him. Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. We must watch him. For the guilty man sometimes hides not from death, but behind it. The following evening, Poirot and Hastings waited in the drawing room of Edmund Vale's townhouse. The air was thick with the smell of polish and tobacco. Vale himself, a tall man with silver hair and weary eyes, greeted them with forced civility. I understand, he said, that you are investigating the deaths of my colleagues. A tragedy, truly, but I assure you, I am in no danger. Poirot regarded him steadily. No danger, perhaps, unless the bell tolls for you next. Vale gave a short, nervous laugh. You speak in riddles, sir. I speak in patterns, Poirot replied softly. Tell me, Mr. Vale, what happened at St. Mark's Orphanage in 1901? The man's face drained of color. He turned away. That was a lifetime ago. It has no bearing here. On the contrary, said Poirot, it has every bearing. 3 men, a fire, and 12 boys who perished. Yet the fire was declared accidental. Vale's hands trembled. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know what the living forget and what the dead remember. You and your friends founded the Bell Society that same year, did you not? To honor the dead, or to silence their memory. Vale said nothing. Only the faint ticking of the mantel clock broke the silence. Then, from somewhere in the house, came the sharp, ringing chime of a silver bell. Once, twice, vali frozzi. The color drained completely from his face. That sound, no one else should know the code. Poirot stood. Hastings, stay with him. He followed the sound into the hall. The bell rang again, shrill, insistent. It came from the study. Poirot pushed open the door. The room was empty, but on the desk sat a bell, gleaming in the lamplight. Beneath it, a note written in a trembling hand. For the third, the toll is near. Poirot returned to the drawing room. Vale sat pale and shaking, the silver bell in his lap. You see now, said Poirot softly, the murderer plays with time. He announces his crimes before they are done. Vale looked up. Then I am next. Perhaps, Poirot said, unless the bell rings for another first. He glanced toward the door. The killer was here, Hastings. He left this message minutes ago, and he will not stop until all 3 who shared that secret have answered for it. Hastings frowned. But what secret? What really happened at that orphanage? Poirot's gaze darkened. That, my friend, is what we must discover before the next bell rings. For when it does, he paused, listening to the silence that followed. It may not stop at 3. Chapter 2. The toll of the third bell. It rained through the night. London's streets glistened beneath gaslight, reflections trembling like ghosts on the cobblestones. Inside Poirot's flat, the fire crackled faintly, throwing long, restless shadows on the walls. Poirot had not slept. He sat before the window, his hands steepled beneath his chin, his gaze fixed on the silver bell resting on the table before him. It was identical to the others, flawless, unmarked, yet somehow heavy with dread. Hastings stirred in the armchair opposite him. You've been staring at that bell for hours, old chap. It's unnerving. Do you really think the murderer will strike again? Poirot did not answer at once. His voice, when it came, was low and deliberate. The killer has a rhythm, Hastings, a rhythm as precise as a clock. The first 2 murders occurred within exactly 48 hours of each other. By that measure, tonight at 10 o'clock, the third bell may toll. Hastings frowned. But we're watching Vale's house. He's surrounded by police. Surely the killer can't get near him. Poirot's eyes did not move from the bell. The killer, Hastings, does not need to be near. He needs only to be clever. At 9 that evening, they returned to Edmund Vale's townhouse. Inspector Jameson was there, pacing the hall like a restless guard dog. "Nothing unusual so far," he muttered. "We've checked every door, every window. Not a soul's come near the place." Poirot nodded. "And Mr. Vale?" "In his study," said Jameson. "We told him to rest. Poor devil's half mad with nerves." Poirot's gaze drifted up the staircase, then to the grandfather clock in the corner. It read 9:35. 25 minutes. He turned to Hastings quietly. "Keep your eyes open. The killer may already be inside." They found Edmund Vale sitting at his desk, pale but composed. A brandy glass rested untouched beside him. "I'm not afraid anymore," he said quietly. "Perhaps it's justice. Perhaps I deserve what's coming." Poirot's expression softened. "Guilt is not justice, Mr. Vale. Tell me what binds you to the others. Tell me what you did at St. Mark's orphanage." Vale looked at the fire. The flames reflected in his tired eyes. "There was a fire, yes, but it was not accidental." Poirot leaned forward. "Go on." "Whitting, Brooke, and our trustees of the orphanage," Vale said slowly. "We'd misused the funds, diverted them to our own businesses. When the board discovered it, we planned to destroy the records before an audit. We went to the orphanage at night to burn the ledgers. But the fire spread. The building went up in minutes. The boys inside never stood a chance." He buried his face in his hands. "We swore never to speak of it, never to tell a soul. The Bell Society was our cover. We told the world it was formed in their memory, but it was built on our shame." Poirot's voice was quiet. "And the bells? They were made to remind us, each engraved with our initials. We thought it poetic. We thought time would forgive us." Hastings stared. "So someone's avenging those children?" Valley nodded vaguely. "Yes. But who? Everyone who knew the truth is dead. Except me." At that moment, the clock on the mantelpiece began to chime. 10 slow, deliberate strokes. Poirot rose. "Stay here," he said sharply. "Do not move until I return." He left the room, motioning Hastings to follow. The hallway was silent, every shadow stretching long and thin. Poirot moved to the library door and paused. A faint sound drifted through the air, a rhythmic ticking, not from a clock, but from something metallic. He pushed the door open. On the table sat a silver bell, gleaming under the lamplight. Beneath it, another note. "The toll completes the circle." Hastings swallowed. "He's here, Poirot. He's got to be." Poirot turned slowly. "No, Hastings. He has already come and gone." "How is that possible?" "Because," said Poirot softly, "he was never truly outside." They rushed back to the study. Edmund Vale sat motionless in his chair, head slumped to one side. The brandy glass lay shattered on the carpet, the liquid spreading like blood. In his right hand was the silver bell. Poirot touched his neck. "No pulse." Inspector Jameson burst in seconds later. "Good Lord, not again." Poirot's face was grave, but calm. The killer has achieved his third act. And yet, something does not ring true. Hastings blinked. "Not ring true." Poirot lifted the bell gently from Vale's hand. "This is not the same design as the others. Look closely. Hastings, there is no engraving. No initials. It is a copy." Hastings frowned. "A fake." "Yes," said Poirot. "And that tells us something very important. The killer could not use Vale's real bell, because it is already gone." Poirot searched the room methodically. Every drawer, every shelf, every locked cabinet. Finally, in a small iron chest hidden behind the desk, he found what he was looking for, a wooden box lined with velvet. Inside lay an old bronze bell, cracked and blackened with age. He lifted it carefully. The sound it made was dull, lifeless. "This," he whispered, "is the bell from St. Mark's orphanage." Jameson looked confused. "You mean the killer left that here?" "No," said Poirot. "Vale kept it, a token of his guilt. The fire destroyed the orphanage, but not this bell. He recovered it, perhaps to remind himself daily of what he had done." Hastings spoke softly. So the killer knew about it. Someone close. Poirot nodded. Someone who shared his remorse or his rage. Hours later, as dawn approached, Poirot sat once again in his armchair, deep in thought. The case had taken a strange turn. 3 men dead. 3 bells. But something gnawed at him. He turned to Hastings suddenly. There is a pattern within the pattern. We must think not as men of logic, but as men of obsession. What do you mean? The killer's signature, the silver bell. A bell that rings twice. But what does that mean? Why twice? Hastings shrugged. Perhaps it's symbolic. 2 deaths, 2 crimes. Poirot shook his head. Non, he caught himself. No, it is practical, not poetic. The killer uses the bell as a signal. Twice means finished. Once means warning. He rose abruptly. And if my reasoning is correct, Hastings, the killer believes the work is not yet done. Hastings looked startled. But Vale's dead. Poirot nodded. Indeed. But was it murder? Or suicide disguised as murder? Hastings' eyes widened. You think he poisoned himself? Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. Consider this. The killer leaves the note. The toll completes the circle. If Vale himself wrote that note, he may have seen his death as penance. The brandy was laced. The bell was placed in his own hand. Hastings frowned. Then the killer may not exist, Poirot finished softly. At least, not in the way we think. Perhaps it is guilt that kills. A guilt shared so deeply it moves men to destroy themselves, one after another. Hastings hesitated. But what about the silver bells, Poirot? Who placed them? Poirot's expression hardened. That, my friend, is the heart of the riddle. Someone is ensuring that these men die according to a ritual, whether they wish it or not. 3 days passed. The papers called the mystery solved suicide pact of the Bell Society, they wrote. But Poirot was not convinced. That morning, a small package arrived at his flat. No sender. No note. Inside was a silver bell. Hastings stared. Good Lord. Another one. Poirot lifted it, turning it gently in the light. It was identical to the others, except for one thing. The clapper was missing. He placed it carefully on the table. The bell that cannot ring. A symbol, perhaps, of silence after confession. But I suspect it is a challenge. A challenge. Poirot nodded. To me. Someone wants me involved now. Someone who resents that I have disturbed their pattern. He opened the window and looked out at the street below. The city was waking, carriages clattering, voices rising. But beneath it all, in Poirot's mind, there was another sound. A bell, distant, faint, ringing twice. That afternoon, Inspector Jameson arrived, pale and uneasy. There's been another death, he said grimly. Not a member of the society this time. A servant, Vale's butler, found in his room at the townhouse, strangled. And, of course, he reached into his pocket and produced another silver bell. Poirot's eyes narrowed. So the circle widens. This is no suicide pact. The killer continues. But why the butler? Asked Hastings. Poirot stared at the bell for a long moment. Because he knew too much, or because he knew the wrong thing. Either way, this murder was made to look like part of the same ritual. The killer wishes us to think the pattern continues naturally. He turned to Jameson. I must see the body. At the Vale residence, the butler's room was small, tidy, almost military in its order. The man lay on his bed, eyes open, face strangely calm. No sign of struggle. Poirot bent to examine the neck. A wire, he murmured. Thin, efficient professional. The killer works quickly. On the bedside table lay an envelope addressed to E. Vale. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in a strong, deliberate hand. You cannot escape the sound of the bell. It will ring until the last of you is gone. Hastings exhaled sharply. It's a threat. Poirot looked up slowly. No, Hastings. It is a promise. He folded the letter. This killer is not avenging the dead children. He is hunting the guilty men. And when he finishes them, He will silence everyone who stood in his way. As night fell again, Poirot stood at his window, the city lights flickering below like candles in a storm. His reflection in the glass seemed almost like another man watching him. "The bell rings twice," he whispered. "Twice for death, once for warning. It is the rhythm of vengeance. But vengeance cannot ring forever." He turned to Hastings. "We must end it before the final toll. For when that bell rings the third time, it will not be for them." Hastings frowned. "Then who?" Poirot's gaze hardened. "For me." Chapter 3. The Last Toll. The following morning arrived, shrouded in gray mist. The city seemed uneasy, as though it too had heard the sound of that ghostly bell echoing through the night. Poirot stood at his window, his reflection faint against the pale light. On the table behind him, the silver bell still sat motionless, mute and waiting. Captain Hastings entered quietly, carrying a tray of tea. "You haven't touched a thing since last night," he said. "You're pale as a ghost. This case is wearing you thin, Poirot." Poirot did not turn. His voice came slow, measured. "Hastings, the killer is not finished. I have felt his presence since the second murder. He is watching, not from the shadows, but from within the circle itself." Hastings frowned. "Within the circle? You mean someone from the Bell Society?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, a man who feels guilt not as punishment, but as purpose. Someone who believes he alone can decide who must pay. He is not avenging the past. He is correcting it." He finally turned, eyes sharp and awake. "I have written to every surviving member of the Bell Society. They will come here this afternoon. The killer will be among them." By 3 o'clock, the fog had thickened again, wrapping Baker Street in a silent veil. Poirot's sitting room was lit only by the fire and a single lamp. The remaining members of the Bell Society arrived one by one. 4 men, each pale and anxious. Their polished shoes left damp prints on the carpet, their voices hushed, wary. Poirot greeted them with calm courtesy and invited them to sit. Hastings stood near the fireplace, notebook in hand, observing. Inspector Jameson waited in the corner, his revolver hidden beneath his coat. When all were present, Poirot spoke. "Gentlemen," he began, "you know why you are here. 3 of your number are dead. The one thing that binds them, and you, is the past. The fire at St. Mark's orphanage. The deaths of 12 children. That tragedy was no accident." A low murmur rippled through the room. Poirot raised a hand. "Silence, please. We will speak the truth today. For the truth is like a bell. It cannot be silenced forever." He paced slowly before them. Mr. Whitting, Mr. Brooke, Mr. Vale, each carried guilt. Each received a visit or a letter before their deaths. Each letter was signed only with an image of a silver bell. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Someone here sent those letters." A man at the far end of the sofa, Mr. Harold Keene, a thin man with nervous eyes, spoke up. "You can't be serious, sir. We've all been friends for years." "None of us would." Poirot turned on him sharply. "Friendship does not erase guilt, Mr. Keene, nor does it protect men from their own conscience." He moved to the table and picked up the bell. "This object," he said softly, "has been the instrument of both justice and death. But it is only metal. It cannot move by itself. The hand that rang it did so with purpose." He turned toward the window. "Hastings, if you please, close the curtains." Hastings obeyed. The room darkened, the firelight flickering across their faces like candlelight in a chapel. Poirot's voice lowered. "Let's speak plainly. The fire at the orphanage killed 12 boys, but there were 13 recorded in attendance. Only 12 bodies were recovered." A gasp rippled through the room. Poirot continued, his words measured and cold. "The 13th was never found. A boy of 10, a boy who watched the flames consume his home, who heard the bells of the chapel ring as his friends burned. A boy who lived, a boy who grew into a man and joined the Bell Society. He turned to face them all. The murderer is that boy. For a moment, no one moved. Only the steady tick of the clock broke the silence. Then Harold Keene rose to his feet. His hands trembled. His voice cracked. "You think that's me, don't you?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yes, Mr. Keene, because you joined the society under false pretenses 10 years ago. You claim to have been a friend of Mr. Whitting's son, but there is no record of you before that time. And your name, Keene, appears in the orphanage register as the surname of a 10-year-old boy who vanished after the fire." Keene's face drained of color. "You can't prove that." Poirot's voice was calm but relentless. "The past always proves itself. You have used the same bells that once hung in the orphanage chapel. You had them remade in silver, each one identical, each one a reminder of the sound that haunted you." He stepped closer. "You killed Whitting and Brooke to punish the guilty. But Vale was different. He wrote to you. He asked for forgiveness. Instead, you made him join them. And then you killed his butler because the man found your letters." Keene's breath came quick and shallow. His eyes darted around the room. "You don't understand. They burned those children alive. They deserved what they got." Poirot's tone softened, but his eyes did not. "Perhaps they did. But justice is not yours to decide. When vengeance masquerades as righteousness, it destroys the avenger too." Keene's hand moved toward his coat pocket. Inspector Jameson stepped forward, revolver drawn. "Don't," the inspector warned. Keene froze. Then, slowly, he withdrew his hand. In it, not a weapon, but a small, gleaming bell. He held it up between his fingers. The firelight caught the silver, painting it in red and gold. "You hear it, don't you?" Keene whispered. "They ring every night in my head. The children. The bells never stopped." Poirot took a cautious step forward. "You have made them ring for others. But it is time they stop, Mr. Keene. Time for peace." Keene stared at him, eyes wide, haunted. "Peace? There's no peace. Not for me. Not for them." He raised the bell to his lips and blew across the hollow mouth. A faint sound, soft as breath, drifted through the room. Then he crumpled to his knees. Inspector Jameson rushed forward, but it was too late. Keene had swallowed something, cyanide. The bell rolled from his fingers, clattering against the floor once, twice, and then lay still. The room fell silent. The air felt heavier, colder. Poirot stood over the fallen man, his expression unreadable. "He planned it this way," he said softly. "The final toll. The bell rings twice for the dead and for himself." Hastings whispered, "You knew, didn't you? You knew he would do it." Poirot nodded faintly. He could not live with the sound any longer. The guilt had become his god. All I could do was give him the chance to face it. He looked down at the silver bell on the floor. "It is strange, Hastings. These small things we create to mark our devotion, to faith, to beauty, to memory. And yet, in the end, they toll for us all." Later that night, when the guests had gone and the police had taken Keene's body away, Poirot sat alone by the fire. The rain had stopped. The city outside was quiet, almost peaceful. Hastings sat nearby, lost in thought. "I can't get out of my head," he said softly. "That sound, that tiny bell. It was almost human." Poirot nodded slowly. "Grief often is, Hastings. It takes on voices, shapes, sounds. It lingers." He looked at the mantel, where the final bell now rested. "I shall keep it here as a reminder that even the cleverest mind cannot silence the heart." For a long time, neither man spoke. The fire burned low. Then Poirot said quietly, "There is something else, Hastings. Something I did not tell the inspector." Hastings looked up. "What's that?" Poirot's gaze darkened. "When I examined Keene's bell, I saw that it was not the last. There were 13 made, and only 12 have been accounted for." A faint shiver ran through the room. "You mean there's another?" Poirot nodded. "One more. Perhaps lost, perhaps waiting, perhaps still to be found." He stared into the dying fire. Death rings twice, my friend, but sometimes it waits to ring a third time. Hours later, long after Hastings had gone to bed, Poirot remained awake. The streets were empty now, the city asleep. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. He rose, crossed the room, and lifted the silver bell from the mantel. It felt cold against his palm. Too cold. Then he saw it, an engraving he had missed before. Tiny, delicate letters on the rim of the bell. To the one who hears last. Poirot froze. He turned the bell over in his hand, and inside the hollow, a small scrap of folded paper was hidden. He drew it out and unfolded it carefully. The bell is not finished, detective. There is one more who must hear it. No signature. Only a faint mark, a circle crossed by a line. Poirot stared at it for a long time. Then he placed the note back inside the bell and returned it to the mantel. The fire had gone out, and in the silence that followed, the city seemed to hold its breath once again. Morning came with sunlight breaking through the fog. Hastings entered to find Poirot seated as before, but calm now, almost serene. Another sleepless night? Hastings asked. Poirot smiled faintly. No, my friend. A night of reflection. The dead rest, and the living must continue to seek truth. It is our duty. He looked down at the bell one last time. Let it remain silent, he said softly. For some stories must end before the next toll begins. He rose, took his hat, and stepped into the morning light. The case of the silver bells was over, or so the world believed. But as Poirot closed the door behind him, somewhere, faint and far away, a bell rang twice. If you enjoyed this mystery, dear listener, let the final bell ring again. Tap that like button, share this story with someone who loves a good puzzle, and subscribe for the next case of Hercule Poirot. Because when truth sleeps, mystery always wakes.